Hello, and welcome to another tutorial from Super Effective Studios. My name is Derek. Let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to be covering the Designer tool in Amazon's Lumberyard game engine. The Designer tool is a pretty cool little feature, similar to BSP in UDK. It allows us to quickly prototype levels and white boxes and blockouts. Unlike BSP, designer objects are programmed to be modelable. So we can actually take the simple shapes that we create with the designer tools and create more complex models out of them for use in the game engine. I'm going to show you a couple of examples here, and then we're going to start a new scene and show you some techniques. You can see here this sort of cart shape that I have right here. This is all made out of, this is a designer tool object. Started out with a rectangle and added in edge loops, extrusions, cut faces in order to actually make this object. That's the power of the designer tool over BSP and other prototyping tools. And there's no limit to what you can do with it. Made a little crate shape here, the cart. You can literally use it to block out your entire scene to get a solid idea of what you want your art to generally look like before you get to the actual art production phase of your project. It's a very, very handy tool. You can see lots of different objects that I've made. Catapults and hay bales and barns and fence posts and all of these things. Designer tool objects also work with the layers feature so that we can add entire sections of our scene or layer them properly, organize them so that they are toggleable, so that when we need to, we can clean up our workspace. So that's just the really quick what it can do. Let us go ahead and start a new scene here. And we'll call this designer test. And the rest of this doesn't really matter because we're just using this as a test level here. Give it a moment while my computer thinks about that. All right. So let's go ahead and see what this can do. Under your first tab here, your Create tab, click on Objects, and then Designer. And this is your Designer tool menu. This is where we're going to be spending a lot of time in this tutorial. And right here under the SH or Shapes tab, we can see we have a whole bunch of different options here: cube, sphere, cylinder, cone. Most of those are pretty self-explanatory. So let's just go ahead and draw out a cube. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you're drawing out objects with the designer tool is that everything, your units, is set by your grid snap. So if you have, if you want to make a building that the size, your dimensions are multiples of 2, you can use 2, 4, 6, 8, just like you would pretty much anything else. If you're using an odd numbered size for your objects, though, you have to stick it at 1. So in general, just for ease of use, try and keep all of your building sizes to multiples of 2. And then in order to draw out your objects, just find a spot anywhere in your environment. Select, make sure you're in object mode here, similar to Maya or another 3D modeling program. Object mode, click on whichever shape you would like, and then draw it out. Now this does draw live, and you can see your units, which makes it really easy to make sure that you're hitting your sizes from whatever your LDD or GDD or any other design documentation you may have states for that level or layout. And we can go ahead and just draw those out. Now there's a couple of features here that I want to point out in object mode. Go ahead and select any object that you may have made. And under your CD tab in your designer settings, click on exclusive mode. This takes us into an isolated 3D space that has complete neutral lighting outside of your scene. It's kind of like the lighting parameters inside of a program like Maya. It gives us a neutral ambient light where all facets of the object are lit equally, so we don't have to deal with the shadows and things that we are dealing with when we're actually in the engine with dynamic lighting. So go ahead and getting to what we can do with this. Well, a block isn't going to do us much good unless you have a scene just full of blocks. So how are we going to turn this into something more interesting? Well, let's say that we want to create, oh, I don't know. Let's do a simple house shape. So clean these up, and let's go into our designer tool here. Click our box, and let's say we want to do, let's make this a 30 by 60, completely arbitrarily. And let's go ahead and make that about 12 meters tall. So we got this nice wide low building. You can bring the robot controller into here if you want to get a feel for how big. I mean, this is going to be a pretty big building, but so now what do we do with this? Well, let's go ahead and go into exclusive mode so we can see it properly. One of the first tools I would like to cover is the loop cut tool. This is your baby. This is your jam. Anytime you need to insert an edge loop, go ahead and select this. So you can see we have the purple reticule. One thing, or the purple indicator here, one thing that I would like to point out is anytime that you are setting your first loop cut on an object, it always splits the object exactly in the center. So that is very, very useful for creating symmetrical shapes. Your purple there, purple line, is going to be your center. So you click once and then the line turns to orange, and now you can click and drag, you can drag it wherever you want as set by your grid snap. Most of the time, yeah, because this is an even, the height of this object is set to 12, that's an even number, it snaps perfect. I would like to point out here, since our width and our depth are, oh no, those are even numbers too, because we did 30 by 60. Never mind. If you have an odd, if an object has a dimension that is an odd number, it will not split evenly. Each little square here on your designer object of the checkerboard pattern is 0.5 meters in, or 0.5 lumberyard units. So every 2 of those equals 1 on your grid snap. Just something to keep in mind for measuring and counting out stuff like that. So we can click and then click again to insert an edge loop. That also works with our little slider here. We just find where we want it to go and we click again, and we've just added in an edge loop. And that goes all the way around your objects as long as your topology is clean. What can we do with that, you may ask? Well, there's lots of different stuff we can do. If we, let's say we want to block out a little area here for a door. So let's say I want this door to be about that big. There we go. What am I going to do with this? Well, we can take our little offset tool right here, which you can find in the ED tab. Not sure what that stands for yet. You come in here into the offset tool, click on any single face, and it gives you this little draw reticule where you can draw out how you would like the face offset. Again, set by your grid settings. So if I take this down to 0.125, then I have a lot more control over how big or small I can make that offset. So now we have this extra face in here. We can go to our extrude tool. Our extrude tool lets us pick any single face and either push it in or pull it out, which is very, very handy. One thing to keep in mind when using the designer tool is that you are not limited to topology. As you're grabbing these things and extruding in and out and making all of these cuts and adjusting the shape itself, your topology doesn't matter as much in how you're changing this shape. For instance, if I select this face, you go into face mode here and it gives us our nice little selection boxes, just like Maya or similar. You can see I have this face floating right here. Well, this is actually this edge as it is highlighted, but it's counting this whole thing as one plane right now. That original plane that was there is still technically there. In order to fill this hole right here and have our topology be good, we have to delete that shape and then append these edges. Yes, I did say append. We are actually modeling inside the engine, which is, in my opinion, unassailably cool. So we can push this in and out. That lets us extrude shapes in and out. Selecting multiple vertices, we can go here into vertex mode, and we can click and then hold Control and click. As opposed to Shift, as in most programs, Lumberyard uses Control for its shift selection options. We can click Weld to weld two vertices together. It will weld to the center of the last vertex selected. So keep that in mind. If we hit 2, we can move, but our vertex and edge movement selections are a little weird right now. It does not align perfectly your move tool or other marquee tool to perfectly align on the XYZ axis. So whenever possible, it's best to model the features in directly rather than try and move your vertices. It really seems like this supports face modeling more than it supports edge modeling. You cannot extrude from edges. You can only extrude from faces. Let's see. Oh, Lord. So much. Let's say you want to separate out this piece. We have this big piece right here. We want it to be separate from this other blank piece we have here. Well, we go to face mode, select all of the faces that we wish to select. Let's make sure we have this, and then we click separate. And now this is an actual separate designer object than the other side. One thing to keep in mind here is that when you off-click, if you're in exclusive mode here, and you off-click off of your designer object, it takes you back into your standard, back into your engine view. Then you have to come in, select object in designer tool, and reselect another object. But your exclusive mode here, when you have it turned on, if you off-click, it'll take you right back in. So if you're selecting your designer objects and you're like, why is it being so weird, check to see if your exclusive mode is on or off, just to help you visualize better what you're doing. So that's a really quick how we're going to make pretty simple shapes. Well, let's say you're getting set up for a modular environment, and you have your design documentation that says, you know, your objects are going to be this big. That's all already been planned out. Well, let's go ahead and show how we can do some of that. I'm going to set my grid snap to 1 here. Select my designer object box. And let's say, reading from my GDD, I see, or my LDD, I see that our base modular units is going to be a 20 by 20 square, or 20 unit cube. There we go, 20 unit cube. Ta-da. Let's go ahead and go to object mode, select that, go into exclusive, and here's where the fun really begins. So let's go ahead and actually, one more thing I'm going to start before I do that. By selecting an object and pushing Control-C, you can copy that designer object. I'm just going to set that one off to the side there. So here we go. Let's go ahead and get started with how we actually want our modular buildings to look. Well, let's go ahead and start with our corner piece. I'm going to come down here to loop cut. I'm going to select and make a 1-unit cut all the way around our those edges of our object. So now I've got this nice little corner here that we can actually start to do something with. But how do I get rid of this whole bit over here? You could delete it and then append. That is one way. The way that I found is most efficient is to go to extrude, select the face, and just push it all the way to the bottom, and it just gets rid of it for you. That's so cool. Boom. Now we have this nice little corner. Now we could just throw this in. This could just be our really quick block out white box. Boom, we have this corner. And because we have our grid snap on, we would be able to select this object. It's keeping its center snap right here by default. Copy. Just keeping all of our snaps, making sure that we're all in the same scale here. Done. I mean, that's just super cool thing number one. So let's go ahead and into exclusive mode here. And let's say I wanted to start adding some detail to this shape. You know, maybe a column here on the corner, a little runner along the bottom, and perhaps a window or something on this side. How are we going to start doing that? Well, we can take our extrude tool and we can pop that out by 1 each. Now we have this nice little 1 meter thing right here. Take our loop cut, and because of the way it builds our topology, we don't have to do any additional adjustment quite as of yet. This is all just, you know, creation. Go ahead and set that to a 0.5 and extrude that out once. Boom, there we go. And we could easily just start running with that. We can create many more complex shapes. If I'm going to add a window in here, select this, offset. Let's add a window there. Now you can see how it selects this face from here. I can select this face and move it. Wrong face. There we go. I can select this face and move it around. This little offset that I've made, as long as I'm selecting the offset, I can move this to anywhere I want. So you want to put it up here or down here. And you notice that it is not warping the texture, the texture checker pattern on the object. So that is super duper handy. Let's just go ahead and put it back there in the center. And I can select that face, hit extrude, push it all the way through the model, and now I have a perfect hole through this. Done. Now let's say, you know, to do a door shape, we just move that. We can also come in here into face mode. I can select that face, extend that down. Now I've got a door. It really is that simple. Now let's say that you know, we've been doing this work. We've got some nice stuff here, but we have some topological issues that would start messing with us once we get into texturing. Now we don't necessarily have to do this. We can just export this object, take it into another program for texturing, or take it into a Maya. However you end up doing your texturing. If you're using atlases, if you're using all tileable textures, however you're doing that, we can take this object. Apologies. There we go. If we come over here to MI tab, you have this nice little export button. So we click export, click which format you would like, OBJ, CGF, or GRP. export as an OBJ. You click that, you find where you're going to export it, and then you can export that as an OBJ. It will carry over your naming conventions. So let's see here. Get back to that. There it is. Here under Designer, on your roll-up bar, you select the object, and here you can see which layer it is set to and also its name. So if I want to call this wall corner 01, I have that selected. I come back here to export, I select my format, it carries all of that over. So making sure that you're naming your objects here is incredibly handy. So you could simply take this out and export that, lay out the UVs, and or apply your tileable textures to this directly. There is on the Amazon website a tutorial in using multi-materials in order to texture objects on different different sides. You could use that technique here to use a stone pattern for down here, a brick pattern, or whatever else that you need. You can create complex shapes, as I showed at the beginning of this this tutorial. Go nuts. You can model in your engine so it lets you get what you need when you need it as fast as you need it. Very cool stuff. Let's see here. Oh yes, Cube Editor. I wanted to cover this. This is a pretty awesome little tool. Let's say you have a large flat object and you want to cut a hole, an irregular hole into it. You can use this offset and extrusion method in order to create, but you're kind of constrained by the shape of the face you are offsetting. This little offset face will always conform to that. Well, let's say we want it to not conform. We can do this and we can move the individual faces on the inside, and that's all well and good. But we can also use the Cube Editor to add and remove cubes very, very quickly. So under the Cube Editor, if we want to click Add or Remove, in this case, if I'm going to punch a hole, I click Remove. You see it gives us this little indicator. That is the size of our cube, and that's going to show us the area that it is actually going to remove. So let's go ahead and click and just draw out whatever we want, and it just removes. It does add in these little faces, but you can append those later. And let's go ahead and show you how to do that, actually. Select face, select those, delete. Now you notice that it did not change the topology of the outer face here. It just punched a hole in there and then added in these faces. So we had these nice edges here to work with. We can select this edge and that edge, fill. And it's added in a face there, but it is flipped the wrong side, so we just go to face. We select that face indicator and click flip. Done. Now we have this nice little face right there. This can also be used to quickly prototype out entire levels. Let's say we didn't need this this terrain here. We're going to be doing the entire environment using tileable textures. I'll select your Cube Editor. Select an appropriate size, something nice and big. And now it is deciding to be a pain in my butt. Oh, here we go. Additive. So we select additive, and then we can just draw out whatever we need. We can then come in here and start carving out additional shapes just using this Cube Editor. Done. Oh, custom set of stairs. Here we go. And start chunking that out of there. come back in later and clean all of this up. Let's see here. Your stair tool allows us to draw along a surface and then add in stairs. Now you are drawing your width and depth first. So how wide you want it, how deep you want the stair to go, and then your elevation in that order. But using a tool like your cube editor, you want to add in some more cubes here. Let's add some elevations to this, shall we? Built-in elevations. Make sure you're selecting the proper side here. Gosh darn it. Pull that out. Raise that up. Go to face mode here. Get that face back there. Move it in or out. However you want to do that. There we go. Stairs, done. In minutes. So using these techniques, adding in our loops to create additional walls and paths. Adding in our loops and our extrusions. Done. In mere moments. Offset. Extrude. Now we have a window. Offset. Extrude. Select face. Door. And it keeps this nice clean topology so you can apply your textures immediately. Let me see here. Oh yeah, it also keeps the, when you keep your faces and you don't reappend your faces, you can offset like this to start adding in more fine detail. Let's say we want to start adding in obstacles. Done. So using these just basic tools, we can create an entire level in hours as opposed to days or weeks. There are a lot of options in here. Your bevel options, select your edges. Going to edge mode, hold control to select multiple. Add in your bevels, select the depth of your bevel. How many faces? Now when you select these, when the first time that you do this, it works a little weird because you select bevel and then you're not actually inputting values anywhere. Moving your mouse up and down will create the effect that you're going for. A little weird because I control Z'd out of that, but oh well. So it works kind of on a slider. Select these and go around, bevel. Click, click to confirm the change. Done. Block out everything that you need. me see here. If you need to make an object that you can actually go inside, a modular hall or building of that sort, you can either draw out the cube, any other shape. You can use the cube editor. Just add one in there. One thing to note about the cube editor, it counts all of this as one shape for the purposes of exclusive mode. So if you're going to use your cube editor to create shapes, they will all count as one, and kind of would recommend keeping them all as like big terrain patches, big features using your cube editor, and then going through and making your individual shapes using, for instance, the box or the sphere or the cylinder or the cone. But let's say we need a tunnel here. We just need something quick and dirty. Done. Yep, made it. We need something hollow here. Say a little box. What's that? Extrude. Just one moment. This is a 50 deep. The blue number there is our apologies. That's the whole box there. So let's bring that in. One out. Now we have this little box here. Inside and outside. Insert a loop cut on the inside. Bring that out one. Select our face. Extrude. All the way up. Now we have an inside and an outside. Not going to do as much good to get in and out without a way to get in and out. Now will it? Do that. Offset, extrude, push that out, select a face. Standalone room. Standalone room in moments. Done. So using these very basic techniques, we can create entire levels in no time at all. That about does it for this tutorial. As I explore this tool more and start doing more and more awesomeness, I will be releasing additional tutorials. Until then, stay tuned. Thanks for watching.